Today, I'm joined by Pieter Jelle De Brue, the CEO of Leuven-based digital company Statik, who champion a business as a force for good. Pieter has a really unique leadership perspective. He prioritizes employee happiness, focuses on cultivating a culture where individuals have the freedom to be themselves. And rather than traditional metrics, Pieter Jelle values his colleagues' happiness at work, leading Statik to attract talent organically without the need for active recruitment. So, today is a fantastic opportunity for us to really dive into how Peter started this journey and what inspired him in the first place. And he also talks very honestly and openly about some of the challenges and his hopes for the future because it isn't just stopping at Statik. This movement seems to be growing in other areas, and Peter really seems to share that with us, share how this movement can inspire and cultivate so much more community, not only with the education system, but also among businesses as well. So I was really thrilled to meet Peter at the Happy conference, which was, gosh, sort of earlier this year. And that was a great way to meet Peter and get to understand more about what he's doing with Statik. So I just knew when I met him that I had to have him on the podcast. His just general warmth and authenticity really shines through in this conversation. And I'm very grateful for Peter giving me his time and for just being such a mindful leader in this space. So without any more delays, let's get into the conversation. Hi, Peter, and welcome to Make It Thrive.
Hi, Lizzie. Thanks for having me.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation because so far we've had a few conversations and I've been holding myself back so much not to spoil the podcast for myself. There's just
Yeah.
so many moments where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to ask Peter this. And I've had to really like rein it in so that I can make sure we chat about it on the podcast. So first of all, how about you introduce Statik?
Yeah, Statik is the company I founded about 20 years ago. It's a digital agency. To date, we're a 50 strong agency, and we've been working using the principles of self-organization since about 11 or 12 years. We're a proud B Corp as well. And I guess you find out about all the other things during the conversation.
Amazing. And how did you first come across, like, what was your, I suppose, catalyst moment for coming across self-organization?
Well, actually, in I think it was 2011 or 2012, we merged with another much smaller company, and because we matched in different ways with the same kind of work, the same kind of clients, and so on. And while it was unintended, after the merger, we discovered that because all of a sudden there were two what will you call it, managing directors, whatever you call it, managers, we all of a sudden found ourselves with a lot more time to do the same work as before, which gave us room to experiment. And it was about that time, I think in 13 or 14, that Frederic Laloux published his book. He's a fellow Belgian, coincidentally, and Reinventing Organizations, it was called. And it talked about how working in different ways can lead to better results. That's more or less the essence of what he wrote. It's much more detailed than that. But that led us to a few experiments, which, without going into too much detail now, but which have stuck ever since. So we set up some experiments, meaning that all of a sudden we gave people the authority, the responsibility to organize their own work, their own finances within the company, their own everything basically, their own planning. And the only thing that we asked in return back then was that at the end of the month, they would be able to invoice a certain minimum amount to their clients, because that's what we needed to keep to stay afloat as a company. And while half of the people were against and half of the people were in favor of the new experiment, the fact that we framed it as an experiment gave it all of its power, because that there was no risk involved. Because after 3 months, if things didn't work out the way we hoped they would, we could just roll everything back and go back to the way we were before, and that gave it the safety to start the experiment. And after about, I think, 1.5 months, people had forgotten about the fact that it was an experiment, because it all felt so natural. People reported being more happy in their work, being able to control things better, really having no one to complain to except for themselves about things going wrong, was a very strong motivator as well. So basically, we've been working like that ever since. We've evolved, obviously. We've tried out different things. A lot of smaller experiments and bigger experiments followed, but that was the start of it all. That was the catalyst. The book was the catalyst, I think.
Wow, yeah, it really is a catalyst for so many of us. And I can't believe this year Reinventing Organizations is celebrating its 10-year
10
anniversary,
years, yeah.
which is phenomenal. And I know there's going to be a bit of a celebration meetup that I'm hoping to join, that I've shared on LinkedIn. But it's interesting how you mentioned, Peter, about, framing it like an experiment. I think that's so, something I always advocate for, like, let's do it in these small iterative experiments. Because a lot of the time when we look at, let's label it, I suppose, a bit of a culture change, there's such these big, long, drawn out initiatives, and they get so bogged down in the strategic elements that actually people feel almost detached from it before they even get into the operations of it. So I love that you've reiterated that importance for the experiment. And how did you sort of, speak to people that were initially kind of against it? Because we always say, when there's those people that are for it and against it, how do you kind of create that common ground, I suppose?
Yeah, I think that the people that were not immediately in favor of the proposal were the ones that felt like, I'm taking on enough responsibility now. Why should I take on more? Or at least it felt like taking on more responsibility. For instance, the fact that all of a sudden an entire team, because we're organizing teams, about 5 to 8 people, and it's the teams that are responsible for their own planning, their own finance, and so on. All of a sudden, it felt like everyone needed to be involved in looking at the numbers, while not everyone felt like looking at the numbers. While that wasn't actually the case, it was just that as a team they were responsible for these numbers, but internally in the team they could organize work and responsibilities and roles the way that they saw fit. But those against were more like, it's working now, why should we change anything? Just reluctance to change, as is the case in most change processes, was the thing that held them back. And after just experiencing everything, yeah, it all just evaporated. There were no fears left, because what came instead was much better. Well, that's what they told us afterwards, at least. Yeah.
I really want to go back to that moment as well, that you had that catalyst moment, because I think, we talk about change, we have those people that are reluctant to change.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have those who, like you say, everything's good, so why change it? And that's what a lot of people say to me when we talk about new ways of working or more progressive ways. It's kind of like, well, if it's already working, what's kind of the point? And I've had discussions, funny enough, with other people that have thought about adopting more progressive ways, but then they've not really had a reason to do it. It's almost like, oh, well, we're not going to change things if they're okay as they are. So I suppose from your point as a co-founder, I'd
Yeah.
love to know, what was like within you that really resonated with this way of working? Because it is so vastly different to what we're so used to in a traditional organizational
Yeah.
sense.
Well,
But yeah.
there's a few things that spring to mind. First, the original company I founded all by myself. I was alone. I was taking on all the responsibility for everything in the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years maybe, which at times felt like a lot. At a certain point, I even hired my mother. Well, uh, she suggested I hire her, which I did, because she wanted to take care of a little boy, I guess. But because she saw that I was struggling with some of these responsibilities, because it was a lot. Just taking care of, I think it was about 18 to 20 people at that time, me on my own, and trying to take away all responsibility from everyone, just to make sure that they didn't have to worry about the things that they didn't have to worry about. So that was one small thing that led to all of the other things. Then there was the fact that when we joined forces with the other company, when we merged, the other person, the one that joined me as a manager, he had an entirely different view. He was more of a numbers guy, and he did a lot of calculations and stuff in Excel to figure out that our billability was a bit low. While we were in the green at the end of the year, still we felt like in our sector, where things are moving very quickly, when there's more demand than there's suppliers to fill in the demand. It felt like we should be able to have a more healthy billability rate and so on, which actually for him was the main motivator at that time to start looking at different ways of dealing with organization, with planning, with finances, and so on. While for me, on the other hand, the fact that I was a bit overloaded at times, and on the other hand, that there's I don't like to be told how to do my work, and by deduction, I thought that maybe other people didn't like being told what to do either, of how to do their work either. So I was always assuming, in some sort of ethical sense, that people don't like to be told how to do their jobs, so don't do it. While on the other hand, it seems to be the norm. I've always tried to comply to the norm, while on the other hand, feeling that the norm wasn't always the best way of dealing with things. And as you're young, you're just assuming that you have it wrong and the other people have it right. But as time progresses, you figure out that things are maybe just as well, if you're dealing with them in an entirely different way than what the norm is. And all of these things together, the responsibility and the burden of the responsibility, the ethical sense, and the feeling that people like to do their work the way they see fit, the fact that maybe this could eventually lead to a better billability, and so on, led us to start to experiment. So there were a few drivers all at once, and in hindsight, it just there's no way on earth that ever we would consider doing things differently than we're doing today, because it has brought us so much more than we could have anticipated, in terms of people just being more happy in their work, being more productive, being more motivated, being just all of these people together. They determine the direction that the way that we're moving forward, instead of just one person or a hierarchical structure. All of that wouldn't have been possible if we'd stayed working the way we did.
Yeah.
That was a
Did
lot, right?
anyone? No, that was honestly, that was so interesting. I suppose my thought to you was, when you were starting this journey,
Yeah.
did anyone kind of go, are you serious? Are you crazy? Like, what are you doing?
Not internally, not inside the company. Outside, lots of people, even even my father, find it well. That's a bit progressive, isn't it? Nowadays, he sees the value of it. He's a bit older and wiser as well now. But no. Internally, apart from a few people who maybe weren't immediately convinced, I don't even think anyone has left the company because of the fact that we changed course. Changed course. We adapted our ways of working. So no, actually no, less than I may have thought in advance. But everyone benefits, right? So there's no reason to be against it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say about like, oh, this is a bit too progressive because it's a lot for people to swallow, you know, when they first come across this way of working, because it is so unlike what we're used to. And there's so many elements that, you know, take us time to adapt to. Was there a particular element when you were kind of going through this journey that some people struggled with more than other changes? Was there like one that really stands out to you as, oh, this has been a real kind of challenge for us actually
Well,
with
yeah, there's the initial challenges, the one that were easily overcome to a certain extent, and the one that we're still facing right now, after more than 10 years. And the initial challenges were, well, yeah, the resistance to change and the fact that, oh, am I allowed now to do this and to take this decision? Am I really allowed? Could you please double check if I'm allowed? So this is that was a kind of conversation that we had in the first few weeks. But all of that wasn't much of an issue after a while. One thing that stuck maybe for a bit longer was new people joining the teams that only recently switched to a more self-organizing way of working. It was hard for them because the teams were still figuring out how to work, and then new people joining them. You've the whole, what's it called, storming, norming, forming, performing, the whole thing. They were still in the norming phase, and then all of a sudden, new people join the team, and then everything gets thrown about again, and then they need to figure out things all over and so on. But that has settled as soon as a certain tipping point was reached, and enough people knew how to work and how things are done, and they could take the new one under their wings and so on. And the problem or the challenge that we still face today is people being too kind to each other. And just feedback in general, like the whole idea of radical candor, saying what you need to say without losing the connection with the people in the team. I think that's the biggest challenge today that we still have. And actually, I've always had, to the extent that it makes me wonder if it's just part of this way of working. People being too kind is a better problem to have than people not being kind enough, I guess.
Oh my
To the
gosh, yeah.
extent that we've renamed the whole thing. We've created some sort of umbrella above our company and a few that have joined us in the meantime, and we call them the kind kids, because we think that kind is a new cool, and we like being kind more than we like being cool. So there, yeah, that's something that stuck. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much, Peter. That's amazing. But it's true though, feedback is such a tough one. I don't think that's an easy one to overcome. And, you know, I think even, you know, I always say to people, I always really recommend the tough leadership training. But even when you've done that, it's still uncomfortable, and getting used to that discomfort is also really hard.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of practice, and yeah, I just don't think it's one of those things that we come naturally to. Some maybe
No, we
more
need
than
to formalize it in a way
yeah.
to make it happen. Actually, we do these feedback
Yeah.
carousels in which everyone gives feedback to everyone else in the team, and that's a place and a setting and a time to do exactly and just that. And then people need to give one positive and one piece of, yeah, room for improvement bit to the other people. And that's when they hopefully say the things that need to be said. And because one person gets feedback from all of the other people in the team, there's usually a common thread, and people, in the end, most times hear what they need to hear.
Mm,
But that's a formalized way of doing what should come naturally, but apparently doesn't.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's also marrying it with that kind of like recognition culture as well, because you
Yeah,
can't have
yeah,
one without the other. So it's like,
yeah,
you know, people always say, oh, we really want a greater feedback culture, but then feedback itself works in both ways, both in the positive
Yeah,
and the challenging. So we also need to have that culture where people are recognizing the positive as well as the challenging areas as well. So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
such an interesting area. But you mentioned, Peter, about, this having a really big impact on the team. How have people felt? Like, what's the felt difference for people between going from a traditional way of working to now experiencing something more progressive like self-management?
Well, in the course of the years, a lot of people have joined the company. If you have left, well, I think the people that actually were there when we started, I think there's a few people left. All of the others have come and gone, and we've seen a serious change in the amount of people staying. As soon as a couple of years after we introduced self-organization, we switched to a more purposeful choice of projects. Without going into too much detail, we only from 2016 on, we only took on projects that in one way or another contributed or contribute to the SDGs, to one or more SDGs from the United Nations, which was a way for us to say that we try and do the stuff that matters, and try and leave the stuff that doesn't matter for the competition. And that's been even bigger for us, I think. And the fact that we were self-organizing made that possible, but that has made an even bigger change to the outside world, to the externally, which led to a lot more people applying for specific spontaneously in most cases. And the people that joined after that, statistically speaking, they're staying the longest. So we have a lot of people that joined shortly after that or are still with us today. But they experienced the self-organizing bit from day one. And all of them reported having come from different environments before they joined us. Most of them worked in more traditional environments. All of them, without exception, reported being more happy, more at ease, less stressful, less stressed. I mean, in their jobs, and well, actually, the biggest compliment that I overheard, they did to me directly, is that one person who had joined our company after a few months, I heard him say to someone else that his daughter has told him the day before that since he worked with us, he's become a much better daddy. So, so, so that was the biggest compliment that
That is
I
amazing.
had in my
Oh
time.
my gosh.
But yeah, that's obviously that's what you're doing it for. That and the fact that hopefully you enjoy your own work as well. But that yeah, that's something that I would never have heard 15 years ago when we were in a more traditional way.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Honestly, that gave me goosebumps and nearly like put me in tears. So I was like, oh my gosh. It's so true though, isn't it? It really has that ripple effect. We talk about it all the time about how, work has this ripple effect where it ripples out into our home life, into our relationships. I remember seeing this diagram once where it said that your experience of work ripples out to 5 people, like 5 layers, because of when you talk to one person, that then impacts, and they'll talk about to another person. So the ripple goes on, and you just think, yeah, that's that. If people realize that actually, if we had more of these intentional, purposeful spaces, the ripple effect that has is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that apart from the fact that this kind of ambassadorship that people tend to take on leads to these people bit by bit. They are the company. They become the company, which leads to me looking at the whole thing with pride, obviously. But then again, my role has become less important than it ever was, because I'm just there. I don't have to do anything, because the people are so motivated and intrinsically motivated, and they want to do their work in the way that they want to do their work, which means that they organize their days and their teams and and the projects in a way that they see fit. And yeah, the whole idea that they have become the company is very strong to me. To the extent that nowadays we're looking at steward ownership as a way to formalize even that, and that making the company make everyone some sort of owner, or just to stress that to emphasize that idea. Yeah, it's very powerful. It has led to a bit of a bit of an identity crisis with me as well. But then again, that's if that's the only by effect, I'm all right.
Oh my gosh. It is though, isn't it? Because, you know, we're so used to having this conditioning of how our roles have to be as leaders or as founders. And so it takes a big part of our own self-work to do this work. I think that's often not spoken about enough, that we talk a lot about the structures and the system and that, but actually how much of our own personal work has to go into detaching our ego from certain labels or titles that have given us some kind of self-importance, or a part of our identity is attached deeply to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and that, for me nowadays, that's one of the bigger things that keep me busy. What's the role of what I do? What's my role in this system that this has become? And so I'm still trying to figure that out, but it's interesting, to say the least.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and the fact that themes are taking over the actual work means that a lot of time becomes available to, there's a lot of time to fill in doing other important work. So that's the sort of thing I'm in right now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like you create that space to be able to do the deep work and the thinking work that's so rarely available to founders. Because, like you said, when before you're in that state of like overwhelm and like being pulled in every direction, and you're never able to have that like thinking space, you know. And we hear it all the time when you know, particular leaders are labeled as, like, oh, you know, for example, like Bill Gates takes a week off just to read every, like, so on, and it's like, oh, that must be nice for Bill. But you just think, well, we really do need that time to like reconnect with ourselves, reconnect with nature, reconnect with the ideas and our ideologies and the philosophies that we live our life by. But how often in the general system and the kind of the grind that we're so used to, do we actually make that space? Because that is the work where it comes from a place of intention rather than just like the default way of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. And today, um, it's even I find myself looking for ways to feel busy at times. So I sometimes I just miss my calendar being full, and my my time being filled in for me. So I try and find some sort of balance between, because I earlier I mentioned the kind kids, which is a new thing that we're doing, and where other companies joining us in building a system of more than just one company, and exchanging ideas, and so on. And that's what's keeping me busy today, and that's good, because I think everyone needs some sort of there's a thin line between being too busy and not busy enough, right?
Oh,
And having the time to think and having the time to do, and trying to find a balance between those two is what, yeah, is what my days consist of today. Yeah.
yeah, we have a saying here in the UK. I don't know whether you guys have it in Belgium, but we have the devil makes work for idle hands. So it's
We don't have the same.
so
I'm going to
basically, so,
literally translate that.
so basically, it's like if you're not busy enough, you'll end up doing something like, you know,
Yeah.
silly or bad. And it's so true. You do have to find those new things, those new kind of projects or ways to get involved or expand. And it's, you know, it's funny. I was speaking to a founder the other day who they're going through a journey of self-management, and he's starting to feel that sense of like slight loss of oh, hang on a minute, they don't need me all the time. And we had a conversation and he was laughing because he was like, Lizzie, the teams had a meeting and they didn't need me. And I was like,
Wasn't even
yeah,
invited.
I wasn't even
Yeah,
invited. And he was
yeah.
like, he's like, that's a really good thing. I know it is. But at the same time, I'm going, oh, what was spoken about?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Finding himself
very
like
recognizable.
a bit of FOMO.
I had to stop. I had to stop looking at other people's agendas to see what the meetings they're having, and I think I know things. I know how that's done. Please let me contribute. Um, yeah, but yeah, absolutely. On the other hand, with the time that's become available, there's something I experienced as very powerful in being available to help people without expecting anything in return, both internally and externally. I can say yes to a lot of things. I can still choose to say no, but I can choose to say yes as well, which wasn't always the case. And being able to say yes and just helping people without expecting something or anything in return is very powerful as well, because in the end there's this whole thing, this karma accounting, and some people keep track of everything that you're doing, and I believe that in the end all will be fine. So I'm free to help anyone who's asking for help, and that's very liberating and powerful as well, because in most cases that leads to better things in the end, for the company, for other people, for myself even, and so on. So that's something strong that I've experienced ever since my agenda was a bit more free than it was before.
Yeah, definitely. That's almost like an unexpected byproduct of this whole
Yeah,
way of working, isn't it? That people just don't realize is there's that humanness around it. And I often call it, we get to be more relational than transactional, because everything when we're in that mindset of like busy, 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 do, default of like everything's a cog in a machine and must operate a certain way, we become so transactional in everything that we do. And it becomes so hot, cold, and like disconnected from our humanity. Whereas it's like, that's what I love about the community that, we're all part of, is that it is so relational and everybody is just wanting to help each other, wanting to nurture, wanting to see it grow, wanting the movement to spread. And, I was even on a community meetup the last month. It was amazing. We had Ricardo Semler doing a talk for our Semco style community, and he was sort of sharing what he's been up to. And there was people from all over the world, and I'm talking like Japan, Argentina, South America, and I just had this most amazing feeling of gratitude and appreciation that I was like, here's this global community, and we're all having these conversations together. We've all got similar challenges. We all want to make the world a better place. And I just got so much optimism from that, which is really needed sometimes in this
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
crazy world we live in. And I just thought, that's what it's about. That's what else is about this community, is this kind of like just wanting to serve and support each other.
Absolutely. I've got nothing
Yeah.
to add. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And because you mentioned busy, 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 which in the old world feels like a good thing. Oh, how are you doing? Oh, busy, busy, busy. Which is actually my own little management company. I have called busy, busy, busy in Dutch, just to to make to mock the whole thing. But that's become, yeah, that's become something good in one way or another. While the opposite is true. Absolutely, yeah.
And I suppose the thing is, like, the truth is, it's not always an easy journey. There are some real challenges, and I think it's really easy to presume when people start out on this, because it seems like this like utopian way of working of like, oh, we're all living this happy life and it's like really easy, and but it's not. There are genuine challenges and there are moments where you think, oh, is this still working? Should we still be doing this? So how have you guys like stayed the course? Like what's helped you keep on the journey when things have been challenging?
Yeah, because it's funny you mentioned that it appears to be easy. Well, in fact, it's hard work. It's just a different type of hard work. It's the constant not knowing that's keeping you You need to be sharp, to stay ahead of things. The the good parts of the traditional way of working is the fact that everything is very clear and structured, that everyone knows what they need to be doing, when they need to be doing that, and so on. While in this new, more progressive way of working, nothing is certain. The only thing that's certain is that you get to decide with us how we're going to do things now and in the future. And we need to set our own structure, we need to set our own way of working, planning, and so on. And that's hard work because people differ. Not everyone is the same, so we need to find a way that works for all of us. And it works in one team, we're not necessarily working in another team, and so on. So each team gets to decide their own way of working, their own internal rules or agreements or whatever. And that's what makes it hard, what makes it hard work, because the fact that nothing is certain, the only thing is certain that everything's constantly changing. But it's a different kind of hard work, because if you combine that with the optimism that all of this leads to, that it's a different mindset. There's a different feeling. People feel that we're onto something. There's something here. We're happy. We don't see these as problems, but as challenges, opportunities, and so on. And all of that just changes the whole way that people look at their work. Even though it's not easier, it's harder. Yet it feels like more comfortable, more fun, more rewarding, and so on. So basically, it's all in the head, because we work harder, yet we feel better. Yeah, that's how I look at it today.
Mm. It's a bit like when you start doing like personal development work and you start unraveling things, you're like, oh, why did I go down this rabbit hole? Like, I just wish I was just like really unconscious of myself.
Yeah,
And,
ignorance is bliss. Yeah.
yeah, and that's true. It's true. I exchange voice notes with a friend of mine all the time, and we're like, oh, the personal work just keeps giving. I've had this gem today, you're just like, oh, do the personal work, but still it's painful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But
So,
yeah, and it's interesting to see that other people start to go through that as well. So what happened to me or to other people in the past has now started happening to other people. And you see people, well, not seeing the light. It's not a cult. It's not. But then again, you see. Oh, I get it now. And then all of a sudden they start to evangelize and
yeah.
so on. So have people taken up roles? I want to do that. I want to teach people how to. I want to go talk to this and this external party about this and that. You see people taking up this ambassadorship, and it's so powerful. Yeah.
Oh, it is. It's just, yeah, like you say, once they start to kind of like become aware of it and aware of what's possible, that's what excites me. And and seeing those changes in people, like you said, is so exciting as part of the work, because it's like, I always say that the whole point of my business, like liberating people from old ways of working and like being able to have that human potential thrive. And it really is, because when we have that like thriving, we talked about the negative ripple effect, but it also has a really positive ripple effect. It also works in the other way. And you see it when people start having better lives in general. It has a huge effect on the community, how people show up in their relationships and everything. It makes people think differently about how they parent and educate their children. And I just feel like it's one of these, yeah, really
Yeah, if
positive.
you get the choice and you
Yeah.
can work with happy people, yeah, it's an easy choice. You can even hear it on the phone. If people pick up the phone and they're happy,
Yeah.
it's a completely different start of a conversation than
Yeah.
people who obviously dreads going to work every day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh,
You can't not love it, right?
no, exactly. So what's your advice then, Peter, for founders or for companies that are starting to maybe think about this journey? What's some of the advice that you would give to someone starting out?
It- it's I think that the most important thing, in my opinion, is that there is no um, there's other ways and they make sense as well. It's not because something is a norm that it needs to be the norm. quite contrary in some cases, because the norm is always some sort of this very consensus, the absolute average, or what I can speak from my own experience when I say that what has always felt wrong at the beginning, the traditional ways of working, I always felt it could be better. Yet I was a bit hesitant to do things the other way. When I actually did change the way of working, everything just fell into place. So I think that was the most powerful experience for me, just feeling that what I always felt was right, in the end turned out to be right for us. And just, yeah, that's reading every book and in every self-help and so on, just be yourself, just follow your gut and so on. But in the end, it is true. And starting with small steps, experiments is a way to go forward. I think, just like you said earlier, I think that's the only way to make people come up with the ideas on how to start with it themselves, instead of you telling them how to do just that. And I think that's the way to start doing things differently, but just starting to do things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Pieter. I could keep going on forever. I feel like I could have made this like a 4-part series. But honestly, thank you so much, Pieter. This has been such a nourishing conversation.
You're most welcome, Lizzie, and it was a joy being on this podcast. You asked the right type of question, so love this type of conversation. So thank you.
You've been listening to Make It Thrive, the Company Culture Podcast.